Middle childhood is the prime time, the perfect time for children to develop morally. Um, Now the child is more conscientious of their surrounding, they're more empathetic, they're more socially aware of others, and they're not bound by that egocentric mind. So research shows that children who are slow to develop theory of mind, if you guys remember, which is knowing that somebody else has a different thought than I do, are also slow to develop empathy. So school age children can think and can act morally, but they do not do that all the time. Um, they might be kind of hindered by the lack of experience. And that's why the best way to improve the moral judgment is to put them in situations and expose them to situations that pose a developmental moral dilemma and talk to them about it. So Piaget wrote extensively about moral development in children, and he actually kind of connected that to cognitive development because he saw a very strong tie between the development of the child's cognitive ability and their ability to reason about moral issues. Um, Another researcher by the name Lawrence Kohlberg described three levels of moral reasoning and two stages for each level that were very much in parallel to Piaget's stages of cognitive development. Now, before we look at Kohlberg's levels of moral development, we know that prosocial behavior is going to take a different form during middle childhood than it did in the early childhood years. Prosocial behavior during middle childhood is one that values close family members. They value cooperation with other children and friendships, if you like we said. They also value not hurting someone intentionally. So, for the most part, children will choose to be kind and will be empathetic if we can kind of cultivate that during this period of development. The one area that they might have problem with is if there was a conflict between adult morals and peer values. Remember, child culture valued protecting friendships and friendship codes. So, if there was a conflict between child culture and adult morality, children will most likely align themselves with their peers. They will most probably choose to protect their friends and hide the truth from the teacher or from the parent. They will not tell adults what happened because if you did, then you might be dubbed as a snitch or a tattletale, and that is a socially isolating trait. They will conform to their peer standards of whatever the dress code or the talk or the behavior in order to fit in. So sometimes, if we want to improve the moral behavior of our children, one, we need to take into consideration their maturity, their cognitive ability, and help them reflect and discuss those dilemmas with them to foster that moral development. So, going back to Lawrence Kohlberg, he believed that there are three levels of moral reasoning, and each one of them kind of coincides with Piaget's levels of cognitive development. The first one is what he called pre conventional moral reasoning. The second stage is conventional moral reasoning, and the last stage is post conventional moral reasoning. So, let's look at the first stage, and that is the stage of pre conventional moral reasoning, which kind of sits close to the pre operational stage of egocentric thinking in children. This is the stage where he believes that children resolve any moral dilemmas with what can make them avoid punishment and gain reward. So they think of that egocentric mind of what can I do to not get in trouble. So I am not going to lie or steal the cookie or misbehave because I don't want to get caught. I want to be nice to others because I want others to be nice to me. I don't want to get a red sticker. I don't want to get a phone call home. All of these things that show that the punishment on me is what I'm trying to avoid, and reward for me is what I'm trying to gain. So it's again, it's what's in it for me is the reasoning why they do the right thing. The next stage of development is what is called the conventional moral reasoning. And this is the stage when they are more socially aware of their surrounding. And because they are at the stage, according to Piaget, the concrete operational stage, they are more able to think about things from the concrete or the observable perspective. So they look at a situation, at a moral dilemma, and look at what is the rule. What are the socially acceptable rules in this situation? The right thing to do is you cannot steal. So stealing is wrong because it's by law, it is not acceptable. It is punishable. So it is the stage of what you might call law and order, obeying the law because that is what you're supposed to do. It's the right thing to do. It's how you become a good student or a good citizen. So morality here is based on what is socially acceptable. What is this? How am I going to be socially approved of and fit in? This is the stage that we're talking about mostly during middle childhood. This is when children don't do the wrong thing or do the right thing because this is what you're supposed to do. This is what the rule is. The next stage, according to Kohlberg, is going to be that higher level of moral principle when you look at the rules and try to think, are these rules there just because, or they're there because there is a bigger good or a greater good that is implied? It is supposed to be there to benefit everyone. And therefore, you look beyond the specific rule into what is the universal ethical principle. This is the stage when moral reasoning is on par with formal operational thought, which we will talk about in the next three chapters when we talk about adolescence. This is the stage of the hypothetical thinking, past the concrete operational. When we look at things and say, well, yeah, I know that stealing is wrong, but are you stealing because you're being a bad person, or are you stealing because you're taking something that was to benefit someone else that is being oppressed? So this is when you start to push things past the face value or what it looks like, and try to question why is it there, and what can I do about it. Now, Kohlberg would pose an ethical dilemma or a moral dilemma in order for him to kind of solicit results from his test subjects and see how they reason about a particular dilemma. And one of his most famous dilemmas is called the Heinz dilemma. The Heinz dilemma is about a husband who has a wife who is sick with a particular type of cancer, and she is dying. Unfortunately, there is a cure. There is a medicine that was discovered that could actually cure her, but the medicine is in the possession of a person or a chemist that is charging too much money that Heinz cannot afford. He tries everything that he can. He tries to raise money, ask friends for help, but he fell short from collecting the full amount that the drug is worth. So he explains to the chemist about his situation and his dying wife, and the drug chemist does not approve. He tells him that this is my drug, I discovered it, I'm going to make a lot of money, and it's my property, and I get to decide how much it costs. So after his refusal, Heinz feels kind of lost and with no hope. He desperately wants to save his wife. So later that night, he breaks into the chemist's store and steals the drug. So, this is the dilemma that Kohlberg proposes, and he looks at the reasoning behind the responses of the subjects. Now, there is no correct response. He's not really after whether you side with Heinz or you side with the chemist. He's not after whether you think that should Heinz go to jail or not. Um, the, the reasoning behind your decision is what he is looking for. So in order to understand that, we apply the three levels of moral thought. We say that if you said that the answer to should the husband have done that, if you said yes, he should have, and you reason that from perspective of, well, it's his wife, he needs his wife to be there for him or to take care of him, then you are reasoning from the perspective of the pre-conventional thought process. You need your wife, so it's a personal gain, it's a personal reward, then it is going to be kind of in similar to that egocentric pre-operational thought process. If you reasoned for him stealing the drug that of course he needed to steal the drug to save his wife. If he didn't save his wife, what would the people's other people say about him, or what would society say about him, seeing his wife die and not coming to her rescue? So you might be shunned by your friends or your family or your children for not doing all you can to help her. So again, the conventional moral reasoning is from the perspective of what would others say about me, and socially how can I fit in if I do it or don't do it. The final reasoning would be the post-conventional reasoning, and if you said something on the level of, well, the husband should have done that because he needed to save his wife, and saving a life is much more important than making profit or money, and yes, he should have broken into the store. So again, it's not about whether he should or shouldn't, it's about how you reasoned and what was the reason you gave to the why of your answer. So take a minute, think about the dilemma yourself, and see what you would come up with. Sometimes we end up reasoning behind things from a perspective of either moral development, and of course sometimes there are other factors, and this was one of the reasons why of course Kohlberg was criticized, because situations demand different responses. If he was trying to save his wife versus if it was his child, if it was a person who's coming from a religious background or a spiritual background versus a person who is thinking about this from a logical background. Everybody has their own way of how they reason about things. Again, the concept here is not whether he should steal or not, it's about how you reasoned your answer. If you said that he should have stolen the drug, or if you said he shouldn't have stolen the drug.